Hi, my name is Mark, and I am a Astro van enthusiast. I've had my van for, I think 13 or 14 years now. It's a 2000 model, and got it lifted and, all set up and cool. And I was looking for information on the motor mounts because there seems to be discrepancies. You hear a lot of things that you get the new ones in their junk and they sag right away. If you have an all-wheel drive, this brings your harmonic balancer pulley down and it kisses the steering bar, especially when you go off-road and you're going up a hill or turning or anything that flexes the front end. It rubs because the motor sags. Sometimes I wonder if the stock position was even enough for when you're going off-road. It may come up and possibly kiss and rub it anyway because we're putting the vehicle through more than what it could do when it was just an all-wheel drive with small tires. So that's a question I can't answer yet, but I did learn something very helpful to all of us. I think it was yesterday or the day before, and I want to share it with you. When you go to buy a new motor mount, you get this. Okay, hopefully you can see this good. I don't have anybody to man my camera. So this is the typical replacement mount. I got this from Napa. This steel seems to be reasonably good, etc. There is a gap in here between the rubber mount itself and the clamshell that you wouldn't expect to be there. There's probably an engineering reason for that I'm unaware of, but I don't know what it is. It's something where you're tempted to fill that space with something like Flex Seal liquid. The spray I wouldn't use, but the liquid is quite amazing when it dries up. I've used it on a few other projects, and I got to say that stuff is freaking gnarly. So you could fill it up with that if you could tape it off, to where it wouldn't drip out, because it's pretty watery stuff. It's not very thick. It'll drip out and ooze out and fall out all over the place if you don't have it taped up good to hold it in there. So that would be an option. But when you look at these, you don't have a whole lot of hope of lifting that harmonic balancer much, even if your old mounts are pretty bad. This just doesn't seem like much. So there's the temptation of building a spacer plate underneath your motor mount to see if you can get the motor up a little bit higher. But like in a little previous video, I talked about this a couple days ago. If the motor mount sat like this in the vehicle, you'd go straight up and you'd lift the motor a 1/4 inch if you had a 1/4 inch spacer. But because they sit like this, probably not going to get that much out of a 1/4 inch spacer. Now I'm going to plasma cut some and put some that I can slide in like this. I'm going to ovalize the hole so I can hopefully get the motor mount bolts all started, jack up the motor, slide the bushing underneath, let it down on the bushing, and then tighten everything up. That's the plan. We'll see how it works out next week. Now, you have to excuse me. Sometimes I stutter and clear my throat. I'm going through stage 4 cancer for the last year, and all shriveled up and skinny. It sucks, but I'm winning. That's the important thing, and I'm still able to fix my van when it breaks most of the time, physically. So apologies ahead of time. Voice is a little hoarse too. So anyhow, unbeknownst to me, until I called the guys at Prothane, which were real cool, they had an answer immediately for this. When you buy the Prothane polyurethane inserts for your clamshell, these are pretty nice. One of the guys said that he had put this in his van. He didn't really notice any vibration, or it was so minimal. Being that most of us have body lifts, that should absorb some of that vibration too. And being that the van isn't a unibody like my Jeep Cherokee, when I put urethane in my Cherokee, you could tell. It wasn't real bad, but you could tell. But it's a unibody vehicle too, meaning the sheet metal frame is welded to the floorboards, so all that vibration has to go somewhere, and the motor mounts are all to that too. It doesn't have a separate frame like our vans have that is, bolted with the body mounts to the body. The motor lies on the frame, not into the floorboards and all the sheet metal of the van. But I noticed I could dig my thumbnail in this rubber, or this polyurethane. It's really not hard as a rock. The ones I put in my van, or my Jeep rather, boy, they were hard. You couldn't dig your thumbnail in them. So these have a little bit of softness. And there's quite a bit of urethane around the bolt hole. It's pretty big. It's much larger than this one, as you can see. It's so large that when you pull this clamshell apart, there's no chance of this fitting inside here. You would have to shave off at least 1/4 inch of the width of this to cram it into this Napa clamshell. So the new clamshells are not as big as the original AC Delco stock clamshell that came in all these vans. That is something that I did not know, that I just learned. So when Prothane made these, they made them for the stock clamshells that are larger. Here is an AC top of a clamshell. Hopefully you can see this, but there's quite a difference between the two. I mean, this one sits on top of that one, for crying out loud, and it'll still rattle a little bit. So quite a difference. There's a lot more room in the original stock ones for more rubber, if you chose rubber, or if you choose polyurethane. So when they made their inserts, they made them to fit these. Voila, there you go. Problem is, these vans are so old, good luck finding these anymore. So many of them have been replaced that I think that they're difficult to find in the junkyard. I went online trying to find these, couldn't find them anywhere. There was one left on Amazon, just one of them. The guy wanted, I think, $60 for it or something. Well, I needed two. My pals over at Journeys Off-Road, my dear friends, like family now, good people, good souls, solid, honest, brilliant, family-run business, and I really love those guys. I gave Mike a call and said, hey, told him about this, and he goes, well, I have a subframe out here that I bet has original mounts in it. He went out and looked. He was convinced that they were. And I went over there and he gave them to me. I just unbolted them real quick. Such a nice guy. But in the junkyard, guys, we got to start looking for these. We got to save them because you cannot get them anymore. I couldn't find them anywhere. I don't think that they're manufacturing from Delco anymore. And it's just one of those dinosaur parts that we need to get them when we can and share them with our fellow vanners. So anyhow, you got a dimple here, curvature dimple, that fits into nicely. So we're looking good right there. And then you've got a couple indentations here in the bottom of this and outdents in the other side of the clamshell here that fits inside there to index to try to hold it in center. I think I got that 180 out. Yeah, to hold it in center. Now, all the clamshells, they're not really rivets, but they have, well, this one here actually has a rivet on one side. You can see, actually has a rivet instead of the punched hole here that holds the clamshell, or excuse me, no, this one's got rivets all the way around. Check that out. This one did not. This had, you could see through the holes that you had to drill out. It was like a punch flare type thing that held these together. And you use a, was a 13/32 drill, I can't remember, to drill them out so you can get the clamshell apart. It's very obvious when you look at, I don't know how to do it, so you don't have to, you don't need any information about it, but you drill those out. There's 3 of them on each motor mount, and then you can separate the mount. I sandblasted these and painted them today, and then Prothane gives you 6 bolts. You only need 3 for each mount. So after you drill them out, here, here, and here, to separate it, they give you bolts to put back in. So these are the bolts that you use to put back in to hold the clamshell together. Look how nicely it fits. It fits in there beautifully. I had to wiggle it around a little bit to get it centered, but no big deal. And then you tighten down the 3 bolts and you're in business. So these will be going in next week with the 1/4 inch spacer to try to get a little bit more lift out of that motor. And if I don't have the clearance at that point for my harmonic balancer to clear that steering arm, which I have new idler arms. By the way, idler arms can vary in their drop. I've had one brand of idler arm where at the steering, steering bar area, it drops about a ½ inch lower than the AC Delco arms that I bought. So the AC Delco arms are holding your steering bar a little bit higher. The other one can hold it a little bit lower and increase that clearance. I've had the best luck with AC Delco idler arms. They got a big old pivot on them. They run you about $75 a piece. They're not super expensive like those super heavy duty ones that are out there, which I don't know anybody that's tried. I think they're like 180 bucks or something a piece. And sure would like to know if they're worth the money or not. But be aware of those drops on those arms. I have some photos of them side by side, putting two arms like this, and you can see the drop difference. Well, the ones that had more drop, I was able to put spacers between the idler arms and the frame and drop the idler arm. Is that right? The ones that had more drop? Yeah, the ones that had more drop, I could drop the idler arms down, and when they did an alignment, they had enough tie rod end threads to do the alignment. I bought some Delcos, put them in, nursed my van over to get the alignment done, and when they ran out the tie rods, they ran out of threads. And I was like, oh shoot, man. So I had to take my my spacers out, and they were really nice. They were cool, and they were working pretty good at the time. I had to take them out to get that alignment finished, and it was snowing out, and I had to get it done. So I said, I'll figure out a different way to take care of this later, and I'm still wrestling with it a bit, as you can see. So the spacers can work if you have the idlers that allow you the tie rod adjustment room to do it. But I did notice one thing. When you move the idler arms down, the van was more nimble on the freeway. You had to drive it. You had to be very attentive when you were driving. When I got those spacers out of there and changed to the Delcos, it was the best my van ever handled. Finding somebody to give you a good alignment is tough. I swear there's so many places you go and they can just, you swear they nailed it until you get on the freeway and hit 80 and you're like, oh geez. But with a real good alignment, I'll tell you what, man, it handles so good. I don't want to tamper with changing any of those angles. Everything's supposed to be parallel in there. And once you change it just a little bit, things get funky and dangerous. My last idea is for this rubbing of the harmonic balancer. It's crazy that it sits so close. I mean, but it is what it is. We can't really do much about it. I'm thinking about if this all doesn't work, my spacers don't work, my motor mounts don't work, or it's real close and it still rubs a little bit, I'm going to take the cross member that's bolted to the frame that holds your tail of your transmission mount and holds your torsion bars, and I'm going to drop that about 1/4 inch. And I looked into it, we're talking to Mike about it, and we have a torsion key and moved it up and down inside a lower control arm just to see how much room there is, and it flops around a lot, so that coming down 1/4 inch isn't going to be anything that hurts anything, but that'll tilt the front of the motor up by dropping the tail shaft down. I don't see that it's going to create any issues with my pinion angle, you know, drive shaft angle or anything like that. I know it'll change it, but I don't think it's going to create any vibration or problems. So that will lift that harmonic balancer up also. Probably quite a bit, because a 1/4 inch movement, you know, way out here at the end of your transmission could be a whole lot at the front of the motor, because the motor's pivoting on the motor mounts. So I think that could work pretty good too. If I have to do that, I'll make a video on that. But I really hope that this helps you guys to understand what's going on with these doggone motor mounts. Everything you get aftermarket, they all look like this. The metal can be thinner or a little bit thicker maybe, but they all look just like this. Anchor's one brand. This is Napa. Napa had 2 different ones that are like their brand, I guess. And they always say, oh, it's up to AC Delco spec. You know, they're all coming out of China. Hell, AC Delco, I think, was coming out of China too. But it really was made to spec until they stopped making them. These, the bowl holes will line up and stuff, but you can see there's a big difference between these. I have the rubber inserts for the AC Delcos here, but they shriveled up. they shrunk over time. You could tell that that rubber wasn't just crushed a bit, but it shriveled, so no point in showing it to you. It did not fill the capacity like this. It's so shriveled it looks like this. It has the gaps here and on the other side. I would love to see a brand new one and see if it has the gaps. I presume it did, but what's nice about the guys at Prothane, they filled all those gaps with this. This sucker's in there, it fills up everything. And I think they're gonna work outstanding. So we will keep you posted, and I really hope that this helps. If you have any other information on this, I'd love to hear about it. I don't know what other brand urethane inserts look like or how they might fit in the clamshell, but definitely information we all need to share with one another. So thanks for watching. Once I get this done, I'm taking this van out and beating the hell out of it off-road. Not just driving down a dirt road. We're going to be popping wheelies. We're going to be testing out pretty soon here chromoly axles I'm going to put in the back of the 7.6 rear end, because I just broke my rear axle a week ago and it was a real pain. And going to get the C-clip eliminators and step it up to chromoly. They say that they're 30 to 40% stronger. That's quite a bit. And changing out these rear ends is a pain because they have the offset pumpkin. So your drive shaft to clear your gas tank. So they're just throwing a different rear end from a truck or another vehicle in there is not very friendly. Looks like a pain, so I don't want to deal with that. So hopefully that'll make the rear end strong enough to do basic four-wheeling out here in Arizona. And then we're testing a limited slip clutch style front diff. I don't expect it to grab when a tire's off the ground, but I expect it to do something a little bit better than stock, and maybe keep the front end from breaking because it'll let loose a little bit. I had a Helix brand torsion style locker that was put in the front of this van, and it lasted about 30 minutes before I broke it. I was putting it through some crap. I had the tires off the ground, you know, this, that, kind of like rock crawl stuff, but in the dirt. And it broke, but until it broke, if you drug the brake, that sucker locked in like a locker. It was awesome. Absolutely loved it. Probably wouldn't have broke if I had a Detroit True Track in there. They're a little bit more robust and stronger. You'll probably snap an axle maybe before you break one of those, so they say. But just a fair warning, when you do break that style of locker, it's all helical gears and so forth. There are no clutches, which who wants that? But when they break, it throws shrapnel and it turns it into a spool. At least mine did. I could not steer on pavement at all, and I had to nurse my van 3 miles to get it home. And I could not turn left or right without backing up and forward, back and forward. And traffic's like, what are you doing, you lunatic, you know? But I did finally get it home. I found that I could turn to the left a little better than to the right, so I made sure I did left-hand turns all the way home. But if you have a clutch style, which again, when the tires come off the ground, I find that completely useless. Even if you drag the brake, they usually don't grab. Now, I think I have too much additive in mine, creating too much slip. So I'm going to take all the oil out, all of it, whatever residue, the additive that is in there, I'll leave. And I'm going to replace it with just, 70, 90 weight and see if I can get more grab when I drag the brake. A little bit's better than nothing, so we'll see how that goes, and we're going to test that out off-road, make a good video of it, and have something to show you guys. We need to see what these vans can really do without swapping axles out front and rear before they break. It's something we all need to know. But if you have old axles that have like 200,000 miles on them plus, they're pretty stressed out. If you put low gears and a locker in them like I did, I think they're just a ticking bomb waiting to snap because they just don't have the strength left in them anymore. So I think it's wise to change your axles out in the rear end. The front axles, I think, are pretty buff. Even the tulips are pretty buff. The pumpkin itself being aluminum, I mean, the guy that built my limited slip, I think he says that he has them on all-wheel drive vehicles that are pushing 400 and 500 horsepower, and they're staying together. I don't know how well they're hooking up, how much they're spinning on the pavement, rather than, grabbing a rock, when you're four-wheeling with a lot of traction, having all that pressure. But we're going to find out. So I will have some videos for you in the near future of really taking the van out and wheeling it. None of this dirt road stuff, to each their own, of course, but I want to know what this sucker can do. I'm an old rock crawling guy. I had a Jeep Cherokee on 35s with lockers and all this crazy stuff. Suspension I did was just insane. So I'm used to that. And when I go out and do something mellow, people think it's kind of radical, you know, especially for a van. But to me, it's like nothing compared to what my Jeep would go through. It was just insane. So I don't want to go smashing the van all up, you know, rock crawling it and ruining it. But it's got, I want to see what they can do. So keep posted, guys. Have a good night.